All right, what is going on? Drive time Thursday afternoon, about 11 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is a chilly but clear and sunny day outside on this Thursday, but as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass, producing the show today, booking the show today. And we are jam-packed, as I say every day, but I don't lie to you about that, okay? We have an honest relationship, you and I. So I don't lie to you about being jam-packed, but today I really mean it, as we are high speed ahead to Utah and BYU coming up on Saturday night, which will be a lot of what we discussed today and cover topically on the program. Don't forget, kick is 8:15, but our pregame coverage will begin at 4:15, live from the tailgate, the ESPN 700 VIP tailgate. We have had line movement, just so you know. I did not anticipate this, but as of now, BYU is a 3-point favorite. When we said goodnight yesterday at 6 o'clock, BYU is a 4-point favorite. I thought that was where the game was going to stay. But a little wise guy money coming the way towards the Utes in a rivalry game situation, a chilly but clear Saturday night in Salt Lake City. So over-under has remained at about 40.5. We'll give you our pick for the game coming up tomorrow before we sign off for our final show of the week. But a lot of buzz around this game, a lot of anxious energy around this game, a lot of nervous Ute fans, a lot of very, very confident and excited Y fans. Interested to see what that stadium looks like coming up on Saturday night. I don't really have a pulse on what we'll see. As we've talked about all week, we all kind of just have our own little echo chambers. A lesson we all learned, again, this week in a very intense way. So I know of several people that would typically be there who will not be there. Some have just planned trips. They've sold their tickets. And I've heard from a lot of people who will be there. I'll be there. How about you? I mean, you only get 6 of these things, man. And this really, to me, is an opportunity for this Utah football program to kind of show the community on the biggest and most intense stage they have left that everything that we thought they had in them, they still do. Because we were all wrong, man. I was wrong. I would imagine most other media members feel the same way. I'm sure the fan base feels the same way. So we'll see how it plays out. We're going to talk about it on the show today. Kind of a quiet night locally last night, Utah State men's hoops. Alcorn State may never just want to roll into the state of Utah again. I was watching the game, and it was 50-14 at halftime. And, of course, they already got smoked by the Utes. So we do have more local action tonight with the Utah Hockey Club is playing the St. Louis Blues, which is hilarious to me for reasons that we don't need to get into. But the Hockey Club back in action. The 2 worst teams in pro basketball are the Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks. They're going to play tonight in Milwaukee. We've got a little Utah women's basketball on the station, so stay tuned for that. That's going to cause us to pop off a little bit earlier today. We'll say goodbye about 5:15, 5:20 to make some space for Utah coming up against Weber. So that comes your way tonight as well. We have a little NFL football in addition to that. The Week 10 slate starts tonight with what should be a good game. When they played last time, Joe Burrow had like 350 or something and 4 touchdowns, but the Ravens won. Bengals are really good on the road. I think the Ravens are one of the top 4 or 5 teams in pro football. That's your game tonight in Baltimore. Baltimore is a 6.5-point favorite. So a lot to do. Fun weekend in college football ahead as well. A little bit of everything going on right now. Guest list on a Thursday goes like this. Tony Jones covers the Jazz and the Nuggets for The Athletic. Covered Ute football for a long time, too. We'll get a little rivalry stuff from Tone today, but, of course, we'll talk some NBA. Gordon Monson, it's the Big Show, Big Hour, but we are apart because Bowler is traveling with the Jazz. So we'll bring in Monson today at 3 and then Bowler at 3:30. We will do a little Utah Hockey Club with Neil Smith today. It's our Behind the Glass segment with the former general manager of the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders. Won a Stanley Cup back in '94. Probably the best hockey guest in the market consistently. And we love having Neil on. Do a little sports court with our friends over at Handy and Handy. Then Stevenson Sylvester stops by for his weekly hit prior to Utah BYU coming up on Saturday night. Tony Jones, Gordon Monson, Craig Bowler, Jack Neil Smith, Stevenson, Sylvester, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, on this Thursday. And that guy, Porter Larson, on a Thursday, Here's what I want from you right out of the gates. Has your opinion on what we could see Saturday night changed between Monday and where we stand today on this Thursday?
Has my opinion changed? I don't think so. I think, what we see on Saturday is going to be reminiscent of a lot of rivalry games. I think it's going to be tense. I think it's going to be low scoring. And I think Utah is going to be paddling uphill a little bit. Is that the right what? Paddling upstream a little bit?
Well, I mean, there's got to be water to paddle. Right?
Maybe. I think so.
I mean, you see guys hiking up mountains with those, with the poles.
So some form of paddling uphill, upstream.
Up the hill. I get the point.
And they're going to have to force a turnover or two. I think they're going to have to score off a turnover or two. And they're going to have to reverse the good fortune / making their own luck that is BYU leading the country in points off of turnover margin. And I think that is going to be part of the game. And at the line of scrimmage, I do think it is going to be a little bit of a stalemate with both teams, good personnel, while also being a little shorthanded on both line of scrimmages going into Saturday.
Going to be interesting to see. I do think it's going to be a fun night. And I'll repeat, I encourage Ute fans to show up and support this team, support this coaching staff that really has earned a lot of support in the market over the years coming up on Saturday night. But I do not tell fans how to fan. One more thing. You know what? We're going to save it for opening tip because I do want to get your take on this. Our first guest right out of the gates is going to be Tony Jones. But before we get to Tony on a Thursday, courtesy of our good friends at Standard Restaurant Supply. That's your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic prior to the game on Saturday. Stop by standardrestaurant.com online or check out their convenient location at 3500 South West Temple. On a Thursday, it's time now for your opening tip. So I've heard a lot of people say BYU-Utah football is the best rivalry in the country. It's not, okay, but it's up there, and it certainly is rising as far as its profile goes. And so one of the things I kind of wanted to dig into today is we've always talked about this rivalry. And if you listen to the show, first of all, thank you. Hello, how are you? Second of all, I try to kind of expand my reach beyond just our bubble here and talk about, what I perceive to be certain dynamics of our in-state stuff from a national prism. And I've always believed that nationally it is underrated. And then you'll get a national media member out here to see it. They'll write a piece, and everybody kind of is like, all right, well, people are kind of seeing what this game is all about. As far as the best college football rivalry in the country, that's a tough thing for me to say as far as what I believe. But it certainly has always been one of the most underrated and under-talked about. But I do think it's going to change. Now, with these two teams, it's not just that they're in the same conference. It's that they're both now in a P4 conference. It's not the WAC or the Mountain West. All due respect, okay? I'm not knocking on those conferences. But forever we were waiting for the moment when these two teams would be in the same conference and in one of the power conferences because it's just different as far as the exposure goes. Back when this was the WAC in the Mountain West Conference and it was Utah BYU, I mean, hell, I can remember living back east and wanting to watch Utah BYU basketball, and I literally had to stay up until midnight Eastern time because ESPN's Big Monday coverage was 10 o'clock Mountain time. That's where this game was buried. Not the football game, but the basketball game, Big Monday. And so there's nobody back east staying up at midnight to watch Utah BYU back in the day in the Mountain West Conference. And yes, I wish the kick time was a little bit different, but I'm kind of viewing this as the first iteration of BYU-Utah as conference members together in a P4 conference that now will give this game a lot more exposure. Now, obviously, there's the conversation about what most people believe to be is another inevitable shift in college football. What does that mean for BYU-Utah moving forward? I don't know. I can't speak to it. The time will come where we can have that conversation. But if we operate off the hypothetical that at least for the next, I don't know, you can't even put a timeline on it because every time we do, like 2 months later, there's another seismic shift in what this sport looks like. But if we operate off the premise, we're at 4 or 5 years together in the Big 12, then you'll start to see, I think, more appreciation for this rivalry nationwide, right? Because it's simply a matter of exposure, and the more and more people who see what this game is really all about, the more people will start to understand exactly how dynamic, crazy, intense, passionate, and quite frankly, unique this game is. I mean, just simply the incestuous nature of the coaching staff, the cross-pollination. I think there are 7 members of the BYU coaching staff that have University of Utah ties, and obviously Utah's head coach played at BYU. That doesn't happen in many other places in many other games. Of course, there are games where you see a coach here or there, maybe take both sides, but Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, your Army, Navy of the world, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Notre Dame. Like, you don't see 7 coaches on Georgia's staff that once upon a time was at Florida. It does make this unique. It makes it unique that it's about 40 miles as the crow flies between the 2 stadiums. The proximity makes it unique. And then there's the religious undertone thing that I've never really loved, but it's certainly part of it. That's why the nickname for a lot of people is the Holy War. But it's the whole thing that we've been talking about all week with the dynamic of a lot of BYU fans who are LDS wondering how any LDS person could ever even look at the University of Utah and wear red. And LDS people at the University of Utah looking at BYU and believing that the piousness and the holier-than-thou attitude is impossible to deal with. And that collides together, and it makes it unique. The whole thing is just different. Is it better? That's not really up for me to decide. And I've only been to a handful. I've been to Harvard, Yale. That was pretty crazy. I've only been to a handful of national college football rivalry games. LSU, Florida in the Swamp is one that I've been to. Oregon, Oregon State. BYU, Utah is as intense as any college football game I've ever been to. Maybe with the exception of big bowls, like the Sugar Bowl against Bama. The intensity, and we'll talk to Sly about that later, but the intensity with that game is something that hit me right across the face as I was covering it actually for this radio station back in the day. So ultimately, nobody knows what's going to happen. The spread is interesting to follow. Utah's now only a 3-point dog. And really, when you look at what Vegas builds in, that's the betting market saying these 2 teams are very even. I have not heard very many predictions of a blowout one way or the other. We'll get into some dynamics, like ultimately Brigham Young over the past couple of games have been rushing the football really well, 250-plus yards the last couple of games. Utah's defense is one of the best in the country at first and third down, but over the past 4 games that they've lost, they've allowed 175 on the ground and nearly 5 yards a carry. Feels like the defense is getting healthier, and ultimately we'll get to more of this as we kind of ease into prediction time. It just feels like if Utah's going to win, it's going to be a 13-10, 17-14, 21-20 type game. And I do think the start is key because BYU starts fast. They dominate teams in the first and third quarters. They come out of the gates on fire, then they come out of the locker room on fire, okay? And if BYU gets off to a fast start and before you blink it's 14-0, that's going to be tough because I'm not sure Utah has the ability to come back based off of what we've seen so far offensively, and quite frankly, based off of what we've seen so far. If both teams do what they've been doing, there's a chance it could get ugly. Now, BYU has not won this game by more than 10 points since 1996. I think the last time they won in Salt Lake was 2006. So it has been a while since those types of things have happened. A Brigham Young dominant win in Salt Lake. It's been a long time. So that would be something that catches most people off guard. But all you can do when you analyze this stuff is analyze what we've seen so far. You can't make some prediction that suddenly everything's going to be different when it has been one way for a number of games. Utah hasn't been bad offensively for 1 or 2 quarters. It's been, quite frankly, since the first half of the Baylor game when Cameron was under center, the last time we had a dynamic offense consistently for the Utes, okay? So if both teams do what they've done so far, there's no other way to analyze it outside of a runaway win for Brigham Young. But we know that this is a unique game, and we know the way Coach Witt and Morgan and those guys coach their teams up this week juxtaposed to other weeks. I thought the Austin Collie conversation this week was really interesting because we'd always heard that Bronco Mendenhall was just nameless, faceless team. It's unlike any other week. We'd always heard that. But Austin essentially said it out loud. He's like, yeah, you never really coached us differently for the Utah game. Kalani is different. This means a lot to Kalani. And for all of the kumbaya love between the coaching staffs, make no mistake, both coaching staffs badly want to win this game. That's, obviously. But, Aaron Roderick interviewed yesterday our guy A-Rod, who joins the show, and it was all love and respect for them. They have love and respect for us. When it is on between the lines, they want to blow the doors off of each other, which makes it for a really intense atmosphere. So excited for this. Coming up, 8:15, BYU in Salt Lake to take on the Utes. Utah is a 3-point dog as of right now. And we'll get to more of this throughout the show today. All right, coming up on the other side, we're going to catch up with Tony Jones. Big week, man. Big week. Utah BYU football, of course. It's funny to hear the different time frames of what both universities consider to be the start of the rivalry. Uh, BYU does not count the first number of years because they lost all of those games. BYU is the presidential candidate that calls voter fraud when they lose and celebrates when they win. Utah has a different timeline. It's just it's a different thing altogether, which is pretty interesting. The Jazz are in action tonight as well. Our next guest covers the Jazz, the Nuggets, the NBA, the draft, a bunch of stuff for The Athletic, but once upon a time was a humble beat reporter for Utah football, so he has some good perspective on everything. Tony Jones on a Thursday. What's up, T?
Yo, how you?
I'm good, man. All right, so let's get a little Utah BYU stuff from you as a resident of our state, as somebody who's covered both these teams. What's this week bring for you? Like memories of covering these rivalry games. What does BYU Utah football mean for Tony Jones?
I mean, it's one of the apexes of college football. It's one of the best traditional rivalries in college football. It's certainly, a week that everybody looks to around here and locally. And, it's one of the it was a shame when the rivalry went away, and I'm glad it's back. And, these are the weeks that everybody, this is the week that kind of everybody in the state looks towards. The Utah Jazz, they galvanized the state. But, I mean, other than the Utah Jazz, I mean, the state is pretty much, factioned into two. Like, are you, with the team down south, or are you with the team up north? And, it's definitely one of the crown jewels of every college football season for me.
So, as I've been talking about all week, Tone, based off the data that we have, if both of these teams on Saturday do what they've done so far this year, it could get bad for Utah. Now, the rivalry game brings an interesting wrinkle. The line is 3. BYU's a 3-point favorite. What's your gut tell you? What do you think we're going to see?
I think my head tells me that, this is a 2-touchdown game. I just, Utah can't score. They haven't been able to score all year, and BYU scores. And not only does BYU score, BYU stops you. That's legitimately one of the best defenses in college football. And, if Jay Hill's not up for some awards at the end of the season, something is wrong. And if Jay Hill isn't up for some head coaching gigs at the end of the season, something is wrong. He has completely turned around that defense, and he has made that defense in one season one of the best defenses in college football. They fly around. They get after you up front. They have a great linebacking core, and they have one of the better secondaries in the Big 12, certainly, if not college football. So, it's a bad matchup if you're Utah. If we're looking at the tape that Isaac Wilson is put on tape for this season, because that defense is rough on quarterbacks anyway. And what I've seen of Isaac Wilson is that he hasn't read the field. He doesn't make reads as well. He doesn't see the field as well. I mean, some of those are typical freshman issues. But at the same time, that seems like a bad matchup. But on the other hand, the rivalry tends to do things that, even when the matchups are lopsided on paper, these games tend to end up close. So I'm hoping for, a close game either way down the stretch. But, obviously this is a game that not only has huge implications locally, but it has huge implications in terms of the Big 12, and it has big implications nationally as well.
Last thing, then we'll get to some Jazz, because I'm really curious, and I do think this rivalry has gained a lot of attention that it didn't have prior to, but I think it's about to even get more attention because we've never had BYU and Utah in the same P4 conferences. It's different than the WAC or the Mountain West Conference, and you're an East Coast guy like I am. I mean, I can remember, since, of course, I was born here, I have ties here, living back east, when I wanted to watch Utah BYU basketball on, like, Big WAC Monday on ESPN. It started at midnight Eastern time because their TV slot was 10 o'clock Mountain time. So, the exposure hasn't been there in a way that it's about to be. So I do think it's about to receive more of the credit that it deserves for being an elite rivalry. But one of the interesting dynamics, T, is that only 9 of Utah's 125 players have played in this game. And I don't know what the number is for BYU, but it's about the same. It's not very many players. And if you pull up these rosters, it's California and Texas and Virginia and Canada. I mean, these recruiting footprints are different than they were back in the day. You're an out-of-stater. What would you say to, Ute players, BYU players that didn't grow up here about when you realized exactly what this game is about and, what they're in for coming up on Saturday night?
Well, I think, that's the unfortunate byproduct of obviously the game going away for a few years, right? Like, there's so much to unpack with your question. Like, when I first got to the state, it was a cute little rivalry, right? But it wasn't anything like, Army, Navy, Notre Dame, Miami, like some of the old school traditional rivalries that, gain attention on a national scale. And I think a lot of that was because, I came to the state in 2008, both of those teams were in the WAC conference then. And then, Utah went to the Pac-12 and, BYU went independent for a while. So, it was one of those things where, as Utah kind of gained a footing on the national stage a little bit, the rivalry, got more and more attention because of that. But, it's one of those things where I think right now that it's every bit respected as, some of the old school traditional rivalries that we celebrate every season as a whole in college football. I will say this. I would be really, really shocked if, it doesn't matter if, these kids have never played against each other. I'd be really shocked if they haven't been conditioned to, not like each other from the time that they stepped on campus. I mean, one of the staples of, being recruited to BYU or being recruited to Utah is the fact that, you don't like the other. And, if you're a BYU kid, then you're not a Utah kid. If you're a Utah kid, then you're not a BYU kid. Shout out to Francis Bernard, obviously, who played in both spots. But, I think, it's one of those things where, I don't think that, that's going to have a real impact on, the intensity of what we're going to see on Saturday night. I think that Utah knows that this is their Super Bowl, considering everything that's gone on in the first 8 games of the season. And BYU knows that, if they get over this game, they're going to be significant favorites and for the rest of the season and the rest of their games, and they're going to have a real shot to go undefeated. So there's a lot at stake on Saturday night.
All right, let's move over to the Jazz. And I usually do the whole let's start from 30,000 feet and then get into the vacuum. But I'm going to do the opposite because I want to start out our interview by giving Keontae a little credit for what he did in Chicago because it's been rough for him. It's been rough for him for a while. This is not a shooting slump. This is a player that hasn't shown that he can make shots. And he was only 8 of 18, but he was aggressive. He got to the line. He had 6 of 12 from 3. He had 9 assists and only two turnovers, 33 points in 39 minutes. He was so good. So the way I'll phrase it today, Tony, when Keontae is good like that, what's different? What stands out to you when he has a game where he looks like he's a legitimate pro prospect?
I think it stands out. What stood out to me in Chicago is that he was making the right reads. And, for so much of this year, it wasn't obviously, let's keep it 100. The shot has been bad and the percentages have been awful. And, there's been a lot to be concerned about. Right. But, for me, it was more than the percentages. It was more than the shot quality. It was, he wasn't shooting when he was supposed to shoot, and he wasn't passing when he was supposed to pass. And I'll go back a little further than Chicago. In Denver, he started to kind of break through. He had 16. He made some really good reads off the dribble. And I talked to him in Denver, and I said, hey, this is, maybe this is something, a little bigger for you. And he said, yeah, it's about time, that I got something to fall, and I'm going to put together a good game. And lo and behold, on Monday night, he put together, the game of his career. He had 33 points. He had 9 assists. He was in complete control. The shot diet still needs to get better, right? Like, I think he's got to get cleaner looks from above the arc. I think he really needs to find a way to get to the basket a little bit more consistently and to finish once he gets there. And I think he really needs to develop a floater that he can rely on, consistently. And, a lot of that's going to come in time. But, when you see a game like that, when you see a 33-9, those aren't numbers that are easily accumulated if you're not a really good player or if you don't have a lot of talent. So we don't know whether Keontae George is ever going to develop into a really good player or not. And, that's the jury is still very much out on that. But, if you're a Jazz fan, a game like that, 33-9, tells you that at least he has a lot of talent. He has a significant amount of talent because you just don't fall into those numbers. Those aren't fluke numbers, even if it's for one game. So, I think if more than anything, it gives you a little bit of hope that, he can find some consistency, and then kind of snaps you back into reality and says, hey, this is still his second year and this is still very early in his second year. And then you snap back into a little bit more of reality and realize that he's never played point guard until he's gotten to the pro level. So, there's all kinds of context into what the roller coaster of Keontae George has been through the first part of his second season.
We'll stick with the young players because while I think John Collins deserves some credit and he was so good against Chicago, we know the deal here. John's like the perfect player for this roster because he makes a ton of money, and more often than not, he's not overall a great player, but he has so many snapshot moments. And there's a reason why he played himself into that contract. And you see games like Chicago, and you're like, man, he was physical. Yeah, he was really good on both ends, and certainly 28, 13, and 5. But we'll put that aside because I want to ask you about Cody. I thought that was like the first grown-up game that we've seen from Cody Williams, and he's going to be, it looks like, according to the decisions we've seen from Will so far, the main benefactor of the 30 minutes that have been left on the table as a result of Taylor's injury. He went for 30 minutes against Chicago, 11 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, no turnovers in 30 minutes. So to me, that was probably from my prism, so it's only 7 games, but that was the first kind of grown-up game, step in the right direction I've seen from Cody Williams.
Yeah, I mean, and more than that, I mean, they were, he was running the offense for a couple of possessions. If you put Cody's basketball IQ, and I don't want to say, I kind of don't want to say this because I don't want to insinuate that Keontae doesn't have a basketball IQ because I think he does. But if you put Cody's basketball IQ into Keontae's physical abilities, I think you'd have a hell of a basketball player. And, I've been high on Cody, since, watching him last year at Colorado. I mean, he's a guy that, for me, I don't think he has a real weakness in terms of skill. He can dribble the ball, he can pass the ball, he can shoot the ball, he can defend. He can defend multiple positions. He can play multiple positions offensively. And, to me, his weaknesses are, I don't know that he knows how good that he is or how talented that he is. And he's got to get a lot of physical strength. Like, he has to gain 20 pounds. He has to gain a lot of muscle. And there's, room on his body to get, to put on, that kind of weight and still maintain the athleticism, the bounce, and the first step that he has. But he can do a lot of things on the floor, and he's I want I want to see him stop being so much of a floater in terms of, he can go real chunks of the game without putting his imprint on the game, because I think that he can put his imprint on the game from possession to possession when he really puts his mind to it. And and I want to see him. I want to see him be more aggressive off the dribble with the basketball, because when he gets downhill, he's really capable of bending the defense. And when he bends the defense, he's really capable of making the right decisions from there in terms of whether it's shooting and passing. Now, some of that has to do with the lack of the strength. He can still get bumped off of his drives pretty easily at the pro level. But I just want to see him. He's talented enough that I just want to see him try stuff this year. Like, I want to see him come down. I want to see him, try to mix people off the dribble. I want to see him try to go to the basket, and I want to see him trying to dunk on people. I want to see him be aggressive, take, do stuff that he normally doesn't do. Like, this is the perfect team and the perfect season for him to just try to expand his game with game reps as much as possible, because I think he's talented to do most stuff on the floor that a wing does. I don't know that he's going to be a star, because I don't know that he's ever going to get the aggression that's necessary to go out and average 25 and 7 assists and 5 rebounds a game. But I'm pretty sure that he's going to be a valuable player, valuable rotation player for a long time at the NBA level.
So the other player that looks like he's going to benefit from Taylor's injury will be Kyle Filipowski. And I'm a little bit curious to see how Will handles this, because right now defensively he doesn't have the lateral quickness. Now he's got a good 6'11", so but oftentimes he's caught in switches. It looks like they're identifying him intentionally to try to get the right switch on him. So defensively it hasn't looked good for Kyle. I'm not sure if it ever will, but we know his skill set at Duke and how complete it was. So the question is, does that translate? Since Taylor's injury, 25 minutes against Sacramento, he had 12 points, 8 boards, went 2 of 5 from 3, 5 of 10 from the floor, 12 points, 5 boards against San Antonio. He bad against Denver, and Will saw it pretty quick. So he played 18 minutes, 2 points. But again, the defensive side of the floor is an issue with him. Against Chicago, 17 minutes, 7 points, 5 boards, a couple of assists. There have been a lot of bright moments for Kyle. Looks like we're going to see a lot more of him. What has stood out most to you so far?
I just think the versatility stands out. The fact that he can do things at least from 2 levels. Like, he can do things at the rim and he can do things from above the arc. I like that he can get to the basket off the bounce, even from the 4 spot, which, typically means he's trying to take, quicker players, smaller players off the bounce. And he's certainly been able to do it from the 5 spot in the few minutes that he's played at the center spot. I think because of what you said in terms of his defense, which is it's an issue.
It's tough, yeah.
I think that his best outcome is that he becomes one of these centers that obviously can't defend, but is so good offensively that it kind of makes up for it, right? And that he becomes such a mismatch offensive, because this is an extreme example because we're talking about an all-timer here, but you look at Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic is a bad defender. I know that analytics people will try to point to his his analytics and try to argue otherwise. Look, I watch him play a lot of nights. He's a bad defender, but he's so good offensively and he's so good on the boards that it really just doesn't matter how good or bad that he defends. So Kyle Filipowski, and this is not a comparison to Jokic, in his own way, he has to figure out a way to get good enough offensively that, on some levels, his defense didn't matter. Let's go on a real smaller scale. Like, Kelly Olynyk, in most regular season instances, he's a bad defender, but he's so valuable offensively in terms of being able to be a hub offensively and, score and play make for others, that, he makes his bad defense matter less. So that's the thing with Kyle Filipowski. How good can he become offensively, to where, we say, yeah, he's a bad defender, but, it kind of doesn't matter. And, if the Jazz can build around that and build, enough defenders around, I don't know if you want to build around Kyle Filipowski, but if the Jazz can build enough people around Kyle Filipowski, that it makes his defense not matter as well. So those are some of the questions that I have for him.
All right. So, as I have said all along, and you can only operate based off of what the front office and the staff say out loud. And so, when they're talking about development, the biggest indicator as to whether or not this new iteration of Jazz management and coaching can develop players is going to be Walker, because he is in year 3 now under Will. And, the other players, Keontae year 2, Bryce year 2, and then a lot of rookies too. But this is year 3 for Walker. And so if you can develop players, Walker will stand out one way or the other. And for the most part, Tony, he stood out and played really well. He had a rough game against Golden State. He had a rough game against Sacramento. He was awesome against Chicago. He was really good against Denver. Opening night, probably the best player for the Jazz outside of Markkanen, and he was solid against Dallas. On the season, we're looking at about let me pull up his splits real quick as my computer refreshes. On the season, Walker is about 10 points, 12 boards, and if you round up, it's 3 blocks. He's 10 points, 12 boards, 3 blocks. I think he's 4th in the NBA in rim defense. That's the opponent's field goal percentage at the rim when Walker is the main defensive player. So a few rough games, but my biggest bright spot for the Jazz so far has been Walker Kessler. I think it's been like an A+ start. What do you think?
I mean, I think he's been terrific, and I think he's one of the best rim protectors that we have in our game. But the thing that I've been encouraged about when you watch Walker Kessler, I think he's rebounding the ball a lot better. I thought he was the average rebounder last year, and I think that he's gotten better at that. And and I think that people are finding him as a vertical lob threat. He's really dependent on the play, probably more than any player outside of Lowry on this roster. He's dependent on how the point guard play is, because, when he's getting downhill, when he sets a good screen, and when the guards find him, he's going to score, and he's going to score at the basket. And and if that doesn't happen, then he looks really pedestrian offensively. But, he's got so many strengths in terms of being able to protect the rim. I truly think he's one of the best 5 rim protectors in the league. But he's also really athletic. He runs the floor really well. And he's done a lot of his damage in limited minutes. I think his minutes load has increased a little bit as the season has gone on, but his minutes load was pretty split with John Collins at the beginning of the season. Now Taylor Hendricks being out, that's helped a lot, because John has started to soak up a lot of the minutes at power forward, particularly against Chicago. So Walker and John have been playing on the floor together a little bit more, but he's just really been a lot better, and he's been a lot more confident. He's in such a better headspace mentally than he was last season. Last season he was just in a kind of a mess mentally, and I think that he's gotten a lot stronger and more focused mentally going into this year. So, and this is a huge season for him. This is not it's not a contract year for him, but it's kind of like a contract year, because the Jazz have to decide whether or not they're going to pay him by this summer. He's going to be extension eligible, so the Jazz have to decide whether they're going to extend him or whether they're going to allow him to go into restricted free agency the following summer. So this is a kind of a big year for Walker and the Jazz, and we're going to find out a lot as this year goes on. And as we get into next summer, whether the Jazz truly see Walker as a long-term piece or not.
Last thing before I set you loose, you had a assignment that was away from the Jazz, and your name was up there with Sam Amick and David Aldridge, who are that's heavyweight, man. Those are two of the best NBA writers that we've ever seen, and our guy was on the assignment with him as well. So unpack what happened in Philly. It's the situation with Joel Embiid shoving a columnist in the locker room, and you were one of the guys that was in charge of writing a really big story.
All right, so I'm going to give you a Tony Jones fact.
Ooh.
Well,
okay.
Jackie Jones.
It's kind of an oxymoron, but let's hear it.
Yes. Here's a Jackie Jones fact. The columnist in question, his name is Marcus Hayes. He works for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Well, Marcus Hayes, once upon a time, was young and a burgeoning columnist at the Philadelphia Daily News. My mother, Jackie Jones, was his boss.
Oh, wow.
She was his editor. She was the city editor at the Philadelphia Daily News when I was in high school, which is why we moved to Philly. And he was one of her writers. So, I was just, it was just kind of coincidental. And I've never met the guy, which is kind of crazy as well. But so essentially, long story short, Marcus wrote a pretty inflammatory column about Joel Embiid's lack of availability and his lack of durability. And within that column, he wrote an excerpt that talked about Joel's brother Arthur, who tragically passed away about a decade ago. And Joel was very upset. So what happened was Joel, the day before the locker room fracas, called out Marcus in inavailability and essentially said that I've done too much for the city of Philadelphia for a columnist to write this about me. And the Enquirer, so Marcus went to the Philadelphia, the Sixers game the very next night, to apologize to Joel. And the Sixers knew that Marcus was there to apologize, and he went up to him in the locker room. He tried to apologize, and Joel did not accept the apology, to put it kindly. There was a verbal altercation, and so Joel basically shouted at Marcus, "Nobody gives a bleep what you write." And then Marcus looked at Joel and he said, "But you do." And that's what set Joel off. And that's when he pushed Marcus, and that's when everything kind of faded to black. So the Sixers apologized to Marcus Hayes for the incident. And obviously the NBA suspended Embiid, and basically the Sixers season is kind of gone off the rails so far. They're 1-6 on the season. They just lost Tyrese Maxey to a hamstring strain. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So they have the Lakers tomorrow night, and I'm out in LA. I'm going to cover that. I expect them to lose that game. So, if they lose that game, they'll fall to 1-7. And it's kind of all bad. Joel's serving his suspension. He'll be out tomorrow night, and he'll be out on Sunday as well. And his season debut is expected to be Tuesday in an NBA Cup game against the Knicks. So that's kind of the story of the Philadelphia 76ers as of right now in a nutshell.
The NBA Cup, baby. It is here. All right, tell everybody where they can go get your work.
You can find me at The Athletic. You can find me on Instagram at TJonesAthletic, and you can find me on Twitter at TJonesOnTheNBA.
Thank you, my friend. We'll chat soon, okay?
Thanks, my guy. Appreciate you.
Tony Jones. Give him a follow. Check out his work. Brought to you today by Diamond Coat. Diamond Coat Premium Home Siding. They're new here along the Wasatch Front. You won't believe what they can do to your home's exterior. Diamond Coat Siding Next Generation System delivers the exterior transformation you deserve. To level up to the neighborhood standard, they're the total design solution that shows your personal style with endless styles and colors for limitless customization, and their 30-year no-fade warranty means your vision will last for decades to come. Design beyond limits, beyond expectations with Diamond Coat, now available in the Salt Lake City area. Premium home siding, limitless potential, endless styles and colors. They're your total design solution. Year-round weather ready, durable in all seasons. Discover more at diamondcoatsiding.com. That's Diamond Coat, spelled Kote, siding.com. Time now for the beginning of the big show, big hour. Did we go age before beauty or beauty before age? That's for you guys to decide. Bowler's on the road with the Jazz. And I wish I was looking across from me in the studio to see the handsome face of Gordon Monson, yet he joins us via telephone today. Gord, where you at, buddy?
I'm at home in the middle of writing a column.
Right.
So that's where I am. And by the way, if we're talking about handsome faces, when it comes to Spence Checketts and it comes to Bowler Jack, I'll take third place there.
Oh, don't do that to yourself. I believe you said, what did you say when you were in your prime? You really had it going on? Was that the old Monson line?
Yeah, it was about 30 years ago, maybe 40.
All right.
Oh, well.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. First of all, when it's Utah BYU week, when it's rivalry week, does it bring back the memory of when you caught the touchdown pass over Danny Ainge?
It does.
Okay. All right.
That is in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
I do think about that at times, a moment of glory. And then Ainge, patting me on the back saying, hell of a catch there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do have that in my memory, but it doesn't really apply.
Well, I mean, if I remember correctly, you both were in your prime. He jumped as high as he could, but you claimed you out-jumped him and snatched the ball from his hands. Is that right?
You have a great memory. I'm telling you, because as the ball was spinning in the air, we both jumped up and we both caught the ball. We both caught. There were four hands on that ball, and I ripped it away from him. And that's the way it happened. So, and look, I promise you, this is not some fabrication, some embellishment. It is the absolute truth. Trust me.
Did the alarm wake you up right after the catch? Did you hear the alarm sound so you had to get out of bed? I'm just curious.
No, it is. I swear to you that is a true story.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on. We'll give you that one, Gord. So let's just get right down to the crux of the thing. Like, the bottom line is, if both teams do on Saturday what they've done all year long, it feels like this is a pretty easy BYU victory. The line is now 3. BYU's a 3-point favorite. It opened up at 5. It's moved down to 3. But you've covered as many of these as anybody I could talk to on the radio today, so you know as well as anybody that craziness probably will ensue, because it usually does. The last time BYU was won by more than 10 was 96. And I think the last time they won in Salt Lake was way back in 2006. I may be incorrect there. But what's your gut tell you about what we're in for Saturday night?
I would expect okay, I agree with you. First of all, if both teams play to their potential, BYU wins this game. And that's something that if you would ask me before the season, or even at the start of the season, beginning in parts of the season, I would have thought a different way. But as we've seen what the evidence in front of us, BYU is a superior team. Now, the rivalry game brings all kinds of different things into play. Foremost, two things come to mind: emotion and motivation. And if Utah can play at the top of its game, and BYU, because it has more to lose, comes out with nerves jangled and, making mistakes because they have in their mind, if we blow this opportunity, man, we're blowing a lot. And they could lose this game. That's why anybody who lays too much money on a game like this, I think, is making a mistake.
Oh, I wouldn't touch the line. I've told people all week, like, don't touch the thing, man, because you have no idea how it's going to play out. All right, the bottom line is this. The data indicates, the numbers indicate Utah, and you know what? You don't have to look at numbers. You can just watch the game. The last time Utah was dynamic offensively was the first half of the Baylor game when Cam was under center. Since then, and look, they went up to Utah State. They hung 38 on the Aggies. All due respect to our friends, in the North, it's just not a great litmus test. Oklahoma State's the worst team in the conference, and they've lost 4 straight. And over the 4-game losing streak, the offensive numbers are anemic, near the bottom of the conference, some near bottom of the country. So we know that, it's going to be Brandon Rose or Isaac Wilson. I guess they're splitting reps. Coach Witt's going to join us tomorrow. We'll see if we have an update there. And I honestly don't know that it matters who's under center between the two because we just haven't seen enough from either to indicate that this is going to be somewhat of an explosive offensive team all of a sudden. So for me, Gord, if Utah wins, it feels like it's going to be one of those 13-10, 3-0, right? Like one of those games where defensively, where the numbers indicate Utah's still very good, they're going to have to try to limit BYU. But they haven't scored more than 24 points against a P4 team. It feels like if Utah gets this, it's one of those trenches, stop the run, run the football, control time of possession, and they win a very low-scoring game. That's where I'm at. Give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Utah's been pretty good at time of possession, but they just have not been able to take advantage of scoring opportunities. And this has been much on the mind of Kyle Whittingham. Their inefficiency in the red zone, that's been a real problem for that team. That's why I think that if BYU makes mistakes that enable, say, Utah's defense to score a touchdown or something along those lines, then in a low-scoring game, and I'm not sure it's going to be low-scoring on BYU's end, but it certainly could be what you've fashioned it to be. Those kinds of turnovers could make a huge difference. The problem for the Utes is that BYU has been much better at getting turnovers and having a turnover margin in their favor than Utah has been, and that stems to all kinds of things. I mean, you could trace that back to Kyle has said that the team has not been as physical this year, and I think that's been obvious to anybody who's watched. And so they haven't caused those turnovers. BYU, on the other hand, has. And so the very thing that the Utes need to have in their favor in order to give themselves a legitimate chance is the thing that BYU has thrived at, not the Utes.
So to underscore that point, the stat that probably has hit me across the face more than any other, on Monday I read that BYU has outscored their opponents 69-10 off of turnovers, which is nuts. They've allowed one touchdown all year off a turnover and one field goal. So what's the combination of way to go, tip of the cap, that's awesome, and that can't continue, right? Like it's a little bit of both. What are your thoughts on that stat, which to me underscores everything they've been doing as far as causing turnovers and making sure that they stay clean, and if they do, they don't allow a lot of points. What does that say to you?
Yeah, it comes down to a coaching cliche that we've heard 1,000 times, and that is clean execution. If the Utes can do that, and because Kyle's been hitting this hard about being more physical, he's telling his team and to utilize the fuel of the emotion to play physically with the rival. Now, that can either work in their advantage or it could work to their disadvantage if they get too hyped up and they start leaving their assignments and trying to do too much. That could be a problem. But if they're able to play physical Utah football, to do to BYU what BYU has done to so many of its opponents this year, that gives them a chance to flip that script. Now, whether they can do that or not, or whether they're capable of doing that, I don't know. And that's talking about defense. On offense, they're going to have to take care of the ball for the very reasons that we've been talking about, because BYU has been so good at pressuring the quarterback and then grabbing interceptions or taking advantage of weird plays that put them in scoring position and allow them to build up these big leads that they're getting. The Utes are scoring 22 points a game, and that includes the earlier success and the success that you mentioned against Utah State, whereas BYU's averaging, 13, 14 points more than that per game. And so that's got to be changed in order for the Utes to have a shot.
The other thing BYU does really well, they do a lot of things really well, but this year they're starting fast out of the gates and they're starting fast out of the locker room. Their first and third quarter splits are insane. And I think if you're a Ute fan, Gord, I think the concern is the ability to come back from a big deficit. So to me, and this is not, we're not, breaking news here. The start of the game is going to be so key, because if BYU comes out and they have two really good drives and suddenly it's 14-0 and Utah can't move the football, that will allow A-Rod to really change his game plan to basically kill out the clock and not allow Utah any oxygen, because I just don't think Utah can come back. Now, if it's like 3-0 after one and it is that kind of dogfight that we dissected. I think Ute fans should feel pretty good. But what do you make about just simply how important it is for both teams to start well, and then once the emotion of the rivalry kind of dissipates, you can get back to the meat and potatoes of football because you know that stadium is going to be crazy loud.
Yeah, I concur with everything that you just said. There's not much more to say about it. I do believe, and that's why Utah's defense has to be at its best, because if it limits BYU offensively, and then you have a tight game, then those nerves that we talked about before. BYU's a very confident team right now. I mean, they think they deserve to win, and they think they will win. Now, if Utah goes out and what did Mike Tyson say? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the head. How does that saying go?
Punched in the mouth, but you were nearly there.
So if that's what the Utes are able to do to BYU, then they start to go, hey, wait a minute. You look at BYU through all its season. After games, it's been all hyped up, and hey, we win. Nobody beats us. It's all that talk that they seem to have been able to conjure amongst themselves. But if Utah limits that to them, suddenly BYU's looking at each other, going, "Wait a minute, this isn't what we expected. This isn't what should be happening." And when you put a team in that position, suddenly that confidence may shear away a little bit, especially when you're playing in a building like Rice-Eccles. And I know the Utes haven't been great on their home field, but in this kind of emotional atmosphere, that could give the Utes their best chance if they can rattle the Cougars and not make mistakes themselves. If the Utes make mistakes, then they're in for a long, long night.
Yeah, in the past, you had confidence in Cameron Rising and Andy Ludwig, and say they lose say the turnover battle's -1 or maybe even -2. In the past, you had an offense that could make up for some of those mistakes, or a more opportunistic defense that could find diamonds where you didn't even know that they were looking over there with pick sixes and scoops and scores and big game-changing plays by Clark Phillips and Devin Lloyd and Eric Watt, and the list goes on and on. But the problem is right now that offense isn't good enough to make up for stubbing your toe more than once or twice. And for all of the metrics that indicate Utah's defense is really good in areas, they're the number one scoring defense in the Big 12. They're among the best in the country at both first and third down. What they're not doing is creating havoc plays and turnovers, and the offense can't move the ball. Like, the margin of error, to underscore your point, for Utah's mistakes is razor thin if they want to win this football game.
How about this for an idea? Kyle Whittingham telling his team, man, this is what you guys are going to do. We're going to throw the ball here and there, but we're going to go out and play physical offensive football. That offensive front, go out, hit these guys, create space, allow us to run the football, and allow us to burn time off the clock. If they're able to do that and sustain drives, which they haven't been able to do really, and haven't been able to capitalize on those drives, if they can do those two things, and those are big ifs, I get it, but if they can do those things, and then the defense does enough to nick up Jake Retzlaff and make him a little bit nervous or make him a little off his normal timing a little bit, keep those receivers under control, then again, that works to the Utes' advantage. The problem is actually executing it, and I'm not sure whether they can do that. But I would be shocked if this was like some sort of wipeout. That speaks to what you were talking about before. If the Cougars get a big lead, then I think the game is going to be over, unless they just get so full of themselves that they're just doing stupid things on defense and they let off the gas a little bit. But if Utah can keep it close and run the football and do it in a physical manner that puts BYU in a situation where they go, they're uncomfortable. They're not used to that. In that particular environment, then I think things could go the Utes' way. But that's a whole lot to ask, and I'm not sure whether the Utes can pull that off. I think they can, but whether they will, that's very much in doubt.
Well, it's back to where we started. If both teams continue to do what they've done so far, there's a chance that this is a bloodbath. I'm not, that we only can go off of the data that we have. I mean, you try to predict things in a business like this, and you're going to be wrong a lot. And as we've talked about, I've been so wrong about this Utah football team that it is going to take some sort of Brandon Burton block, Scott Mitchell coming out of nowhere, John White, Jason Shelley with a big comeback, like all of the crazy rivalry memories we have should give Ute fans confidence because this game is different than other games on the schedule. But what we've seen so far simply is BYU is a much better team almost all the way around. But let's dig into a little bit, Gordon, your opinion on what that stadium's going to look like on Saturday night, because it has become a narrative that's gotten a little out of control. There are online ticket outlets where you can look and kind of see what's available, and it's hard to tell whether or not BYU fans are snatching up all these tickets that a lot of Ute fans seem to be selling. I have a hard time believing there's going to be a ton of blue. I do think Ute fans will show up. I mean, in a way, this is going to be potentially the most important game on the schedule for the rest of the season for Utah football. Even if they go to a bowl, it's going to be somewhat meaningless. The only thing worse than playing in a throwaway bowl game is not being eligible for one. So this is massive for Utah to show the community maybe one time this season that they are who we thought that they could be. So what are you hearing from your vantage point about, fan attendance? I know there's a lot of anxiety and nervous feelings by Ute fans, but do you think we're going to see a good portion of blue in Salt Lake on Saturday night?
I think we'll see more blue than is typically the case in these rivalry games, but Ute fans are going to show up. I mean, I think they are worried, but I think they're going to show up and they're going to pour the same emotion that they always do in this particular game, And if the Utes can feed off of that, but the Utes have to give the crowd, they have to give them encouragement that, hey, they're not wasting their time. And it's for instance, okay, so one of the things that I think will be really interesting to see is will Morgan Scally pressure Jake Retzlaff, and how much will he pressure him? How much will they try to get those big plays that you're talking about, force those kinds of mistakes? In order to do that, if they let Jake Retzlaff sit back there and peruse the field and get the ball to the right place or to the right player for the right reasons, then they're going to lose this game. If they disturb him, if they make him jumpy, then, he might flash back to some of the things we saw a year ago where he will make mistakes. And so is Morgan Scally going to be willing to do that? And if he does do it and they get sacks, then what happens? The crowd erupts and the emotion is there and the big plays are made and the Ute fans are feeling pretty good. If it doesn't happen and BYU is as comfortable as it's usually been or almost always been this season, then that's not going to work. So the crowd has to work in the Utes' favor, but the Utes have to feed that beast.
Yeah, I mean, there's been kind of I hate the term narrative, but that's kind of the right term to use with this one. There's kind of this narrative that's gone on around the marketplace here about how docile that crowd has been this year and how it doesn't feel like it typically has over the past decade or so at Rice Eccles, but you've got to give them something to cheer for. You can't – the muss is always going to be the muss. But if Utah football, if their players and coaches want to see this crowd and hear this crowd the way it typically is, they've got to feed them, man. You can't expect them just to go crazy if there's nothing going on.
So if the Utes make mistakes and BYU builds that early lead that you're talking about, what's the place going to look like? What kind of advantage that the Utes usually or typically would have, that's going to dissipate. And then so really – I know the Utes want to depend on their crowd to really give them a boost, but as you said, they have to give them a reason. And if they don't give them that reason, then the place is going to get quiet real quick.
You want to give us a little tease for the column you're writing right now for our friends of the Trib?
Well, I've written a couple of columns. I don't learn my lessons very well sometimes, Spence, but I have the 50 things that are bound to happen in this game. And I've got that written, and I think that'll be either tomorrow or Saturday. I'm not sure which. But I take a stab at predicting specific things that will happen in this game. And I got to tell you, as I've done what you said and what you've been doing all week, and before that probably studying the stats, looking at the numbers, looking at the record, examining what's happened in previous weeks, I don't see a lot of practical reasons to pick the Utes to win. Now, in that same breath, I'll say that is it possible that they can win? Yeah, it is possible. But things that haven't happened very often this season are going to have to happen against a team that is playing really out of its mind.
What does it mean for Arsenal if Nick Cushing decides to go to the Gunners?
Disastrous.
Oh man,
disastrous. That's catastrophic. Even.
Yeah.
I just think that's something that they cannot allow to happen.
Well said. I concur. All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate the time today. I hope to see you in studio next week. All right.
All right, and give Bowler my love.
Will do. The great Gordon Monson from the Salt Lake Tribune, my radio partner for 7 years back in the old days, brought to you today by Clearwater Distilling, the only distillery in Utah County, open on Sundays. Great spirits, tasting room, nicest crew around. Limited release Wednesday whiskey batch number 2 out right now. It's a mix of their bourbon and their rye whiskeys. Try the Scandalous, the Renee, or their vodka now in most state liquor stores. They are the official spirits provider for our VIP ESPN tailgate that we have at every home game. So check out the tailgate, schedule a tour or tasting in their Victorian tasting room. It makes a great date night or a fun activity anytime. It's authentic, vintage, prohibition prescriptions and decor. So ultra premium spirits, many with a unique twist. You can buy their spirits in state liquor stores online, or take a trip to their beautiful distillery, grab some booze, some cigars, immerse yourself in the Clearwater Distilling culture. More information can be found online at clearwaterdistilling.com, or check out their location at 564 West, 700 South in Pleasant Grove. Bowlers next from the road right here on ESPN 700. rear delt fly day today. Just crushing, just moving weight around. Little pour some sugar on me comes on. Motivated to finish the superset. Thought about my guy Bowler. So that's why we're doing this today.
That's not a bad gym playlist. Little Def Leppard. I'm on board.
Just moving weight around, man, like it's nothing. It's not a big deal. Live from the road, Milwaukee, I believe, is where we find the voice of the Jazz, Craig Bowler. Jack Bowler, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Hey, Spence, I'm well. I'm glad that kicked a little energy in my pants right there, man. A little Def Leppard coming back. Just caught off at the bus, a 2-hour ride from Chicago to the Fiserv Forum. So we're here and then fly to San Antonio after the game with the Bucks tonight. Kind of a crazy road schedule.
We'll get to the Jazz in a moment, Craig. But, of course, as you know, as someone who was a big booming voice during college football season and did radio here locally, it's a big week around here with Utah and BYU playing a little American football on Saturday night. When you hear rivalry week, Utah BYU football week, what are some thoughts that come to your mind?
Oh, man, I love it. And I'm so glad BYU and Utah in the same conference with even more impact now, Spence. You know, the old days of the Mountain West, the WAC, this is great. I mean, you know that it's going to be here, whether it's going to be home or away for whatever team. Utah, dials up first with a home game at Rice-Eccles, and I think it's great, man. It's what fans want. Coaches may not like it, but it gives you that feel-good feeling. Utah's struggling in a big way this year, unexpectedly. So this game with BYU, who is winning and dominating, undefeated, there's a lot on the line here, man, to save a season, or BYU really jumps into the national scene and really knocks on the door. And I think it's about, hey, look at us. We're for real. And that's what I think BYU's most interested in. But, hey, every week's different, Spence, as you know. Rivalry weeks, really, you can't go with what the spread is. The emotion plays big. The home crowd plays big unless those fans have sold off tickets, and there'll be more blue than red. And that'll be intriguing to see.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic here locally for sure. Not exactly, I don't exactly know what to expect based off of rumors here or there. It does sound like a lot of Ute fans have tapped out, but I'm sure a lot of Ute fans will be there loud and proud. And if you're a BYU fan, you probably want to attend because you feel good about your chances. But, you grew up with rivalries, K-State, Kansas. You've called rivalries throughout the course of your broadcasting career. So as you just outlined, the dynamic of this game certainly could, and in my opinion, probably will make it close. But the data tells us BYU is just simply the better team through 8 games. But what is it, Craig, about rivalries you've been a part of, rivalries you've covered that make the environment so intense and make the outcome of the game oftentimes impossible to ascertain?
Well, in my opinion, from my experience, it's the one moment where one mistake can fuel the confidence of the underdog or fuel the confidence of the team that is supposed to dominate. And so that's what I've always noticed is a fumble early can give new life to the underdog, or it can give dominance to the team that is expected or favored to win. I think that's the one key is you cannot make mental mistakes. And BYU has taken every opportunity this year, and we've talked a lot about just being opportunistic. Look, they've earned that, but, to make something out of that turnover to really be costly for their opponent. And K-State lived it, by the way. That's really what started this whole run and this dominance of BYU, and their confidence grew, I thought, immensely after the K-State victory. So, for Utah, if you get down and this, you're 4-4, you still play maybe for a bowl game. Not sure how hyped fans are about just getting the 6 wins, but this one just on paper means more. In the SEC when I was at CBS, every game felt like a rivalry game because the competition is so keen in that conference. The LSU, Alabama, Auburn, Alabama. I got to call all those, and man, it just has a special hum. You'll feel the energy in the building unless BYU is able to take it out, and that's what I mean by something early that has to dictate maybe the the outcome of the game. There's always a chance to rally back, but I tell you that first defensive series or that first offensive series, whoever wins the coin flip and how they decide to go. But Spence, that's what I've always felt, is that you can change it quickly if you take advantage of what's given to you. And if you don't, then the opponent's going to, I think, roar back and try to dominate.
One more thing here, and you just kind of alluded to it, because coming from a guy who has called some of the biggest games in the landscape of college football, you can pull up lists like greatest rivalries in college football. You're going to see Michigan, Ohio State, Bama, Auburn, Army, Navy, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Notre Dame. Most of the lists,
right,
you'll have Utah, BYU around 15 or 16. And I think that's going to change because we've been waiting for BYU and Utah to be in the same conference, but not just the same conference, the same P4 conference. This isn't the WAC or the
right.
Mountain West, all due respect. So now it's this new era starting on Saturday where more people are simply going to see it. As somebody who's called some of the biggest rivalry games and has been a part of Utah BYU, how does this rivalry stack up with the Auburns and Bamas and the USC Notre Dames of the world?
Well, that's another great conversation to have because, look, KU K-State was just more a four-state area. Okay, so was Nebraska and Oklahoma back in the day as Switzer, right, and Osborne. But this it spreads, is my point. And in the Southeastern Conference, it's religion, Spence. It is. And you have to experience it on game day and even the whole week because people travel miles and they actually have the 35-foot RVs and make it a religious, moment in a way. Football is what people just do from August until December or the first of the year when the playoffs come in. For BYU and Utah, I think it ranks higher than people give it credit for. Honestly, I do. And when I was at CBS and Fox and ESPN, they always talked about, hey, what do you think? Is it really that big a deal? I said, absolutely, because it splinters a state of, and you always talk about it, the religion part of it, red and blue, Mormon or non-Mormon, that feeds it. Maybe not as much as it once did, but I still think it's very real. But then you add in this year the fact that you have two Big 12 teams back, and now a team that Utah was favored to be a real player nationally, not only in the conference, Spence, but my gosh, they were talking about hosting the first round of the playoffs. That's not going to happen, but BYU could easily. And that's what makes, I think, this such an intriguing game is how the turn of events throughout the last 3 months have occurred. And, the injury to Cam and the way that BYU's defense has really bowed their back and played incredibly well. And what Jake's been able to do to handle the offense in Provo. So I think this is top five. Personally, people may laugh and chuckle, but I think if you're in this part of the West, yeah, it's real. It just hasn't been exposed as much. And I'm still not in favor of an 8:15 kick because, again, on the East Coast, that's late, and you may not see the ending of it. I'd still like to see it more in a, quote, prime time arena, 6 o'clock, the 5:30 window, and let people really enjoy it around the country. But you're still going to see a hell of a football game, and you should see a lot of the pomp and circumstance that goes with it. And I love calling those games. Scott Mitchell, the one year we had it down in Provo, I called, and boy, did Mitchell put on a show. And the dominance of BYU was so keen for so long, and then Mac came in and changed the whole culture. And Lavelle and him actually were friends, and that didn't sit very well, Spence. You know that with the Cougar and the Ute fans is how these two guys get along. But they were bonded up until Lavelle's passing and beyond. But I just think it's special. And you know what? I hope fans have a great time because it only happens once a year, and it looks like it's going to come back for a long time.
All right, let's move over to some jazz. And, we do Talking Jazz over at KUTV with me and Dave Fox. And we were just looking at the schedule and wondering aloud, like, when's the first win going to come? Because the schedule's tough, man. Like, they're on the road, then they're home with the Suns and the Mavs, then they're back on the road. And And look, Chicago, in a way, is kind of where Utah is. They're trying to figure out what they have with their young players. They have some decent vets in Nikola Vucevic and obviously Zach LaVine, who didn't play. So that's not a great team. But I was just really happy for him, Craig, just to get one.
Yeah.
And I was really happy for Keontae to have a game that reminded everybody why he has so much potential. So let's just start in the vacuum as the guy that called the game with kind of the feel around the team after getting their first win in a road win against Chicago.
Spence, I think John Collins was the fuel. I really do. I thought he would not let this team get beaten again. Collins has come off the bench, and whatever you want to say, as a veteran, he's accepted a role of a bench guy. He can start if he has to, but he's shooting the ball extremely well from 3 and 2. He's a rebounder, almost 8 a game. He had 12 against Chicago. I thought that his veteran energy helped fuel Keontae. It helped fuel Cody Williams to a nice, game. And Walker Kessler, man, has really turned his game up. The way he finished last year, the way he started, two different polar opposites. But, Walker's been able to find some confidence, find some muscle, and that's been a good thing for the Jazz. 22 rebounds through 7 games, Spence, is, 3+ blocks a game. I should say 22 blocks. And so, 3+ blocks a game. But I just thought John was really the fuel of what that win was, 68 points. How about 35 assists? We haven't seen that. And maybe the biggest stat of all is the Jazz finally did not just put themselves in the ditch with turnovers. They had 13. That's doable. And they only gave up 12 points. And that was a season low in that stat. So the bench continues to play well. He's rotated, about 10 to 11 guys in. And without marketing, it's I thought probably even a sweeter win, and JC as well. So the young guys had to really take control of that game.
So it doesn't pop off the screen when you're looking at the box score, but, you and I discussed the dynamic of who would get the minutes on the table after Taylor went down. There's 28, 30 minutes available. Looks like Cody's going to be the guy. That was the best game Cody has played. It's only 7 games. It's Sports Talk Radio, right. So we're going to talk about what we have. And through 7 games, that was a grown-up game from Cody. He had 11 points. He had 5 boards. He had 4 assists. He did not turn it over in 30 minutes, okay, for your 7th NBA game, and no turnover, staying clean, and being able to board a little bit and being able to guard a little bit. That, to me, was the best game I've seen from Cody. Give me your thoughts, Craig.
No, I think he feels like watching him, and after that game, talking to him is like, it's that switch Thurl always talks about. When do you actually believe I belong? Okay? And I thought this game probably he turned the light switch up and on because he realized that he can compete. And his body is not one that you're going to dominate guys with, but yet he's smart. Angles. I thought he played angles better than he has in the early part of this season. You're right. He can go in and rebound. 11 points. I like it. He was still getting his teammates involved. But, you're the 10th pick, and you play, and you're a young guy out of Colorado, and the immense pressure to perform instantly is there for all these guys now, Spence. You get 1 year of college, and now you have to be developed. And it's not when Thurl came out 4 years and won a national championship with North Carolina State. One of the last guys I remember was Wesley Matthews, right, that the Jazz picked up and played 4 years at Marquette. That just doesn't happen, right? Because if you're not out after 2, something's not right, and teams don't want to touch you. Edey's an exception, right, at Purdue coming into the NBA. But I thought he played well. I think Flip has done an amazing job as well. By the way, he's 21 today. Can you believe that?
Happy birthday.
That's how we're talking about. Most of these guys are 20. They came in at 19. Seems like most of them have November birthdays. So, Sensabaugh, and the others in Keontae who had, how about the 9-2 turnover ratio? 9 assists and 2 turnovers. And Keontae continues to make maybe baby steps, but I thought he made a big, big step in Chicago on Monday night.
All right, before we get to tonight, let me just, because you touched on Walker, but I want to expand it. Because as you and I discussed to start the year, I am really keen in on him because this is his third year under Will, and they traded Ochai. So, like, this is the third-year example. Because we know that Quinn and his staff were able to develop young players. We saw it with Hayward. We saw it with Mitchell. We saw it with Gobert. And obviously previous iterations of the Jazz have been able to develop. It's an organization known for its development, but this is a new staff. It's a new front office. And if they can develop players, Walker's going to be our example because this is year 3, and it just is different after you've done some things for a while. And he's had a couple of off nights. He wasn't great against Golden State. He wasn't great against Sacramento. But overall, this to me is the one piece of the start where I go, okay, that's like an A+ start for him. Overall on the season, his splits are really, really impressive. And he is back to what we saw at the start of the career, and he's actually playing better. He's double-digit points. He's 10 points. He's 12 boards. He's 4 offensive rebounds a night, which is a massive number. He's blocking 3 shots a night. And ultimately, to me, again, as a result of this, quote, development situation, we need to see what he's about year 3. What has stood out most to you about what I perceive to be the brightest spot of the start to the Jazz season?
I think you got to give credit. My first thought when you asked that question was Will Hardy. I think that he has not let up on Walker, and I think he's encouraged him at the same time. Look, coaching is you have to have a psychology degree alongside, and you have to know your players, their personalities, what switch to turn on and which one to turn off. I think he's been brilliant with Walker. I really do. He's been hard on him. You know what? He's been very public about that conversation about quit looking at me. And Walker has. He's finally grown. He's maturing. He understands who he is, and he's finding little bits of confidence, Spence, along the way. And the Chicago game was just another piece of the puzzle. So I give Will a lot of credit for just helping him along and through last year's, at times, a bit of a debacle. But I've talked to Walker a ton, and he knew he's left-hand dominant. So when he hurt his elbow, the left elbow, he knew that he wasn't going to be able to perform and couldn't perform at the level he wanted. And so what happens during the people always say this, the sophomore slump. It bit him. And how do you respond to it, Spence? That's the biggest thing. Hardy, I think, has helped Walker come back, grow up, and go out and play with a bit more of a he's not a mean guy, but on the floor he can at least express it, right? He can play with some high-level energy. And those numbers you spoke of, he's shooting 66% from the floor. He has the 3+ block shots. And the guy's rebounding nearly 12 boards a night and averaging 10. So that's a big man who's making a difference on this team. And, the point is, if they can develop Walker Kessler from basically just kind of a baby-faced kid out of Auburn and make him into, a legitimate big who can run the floor and still has to improve his free throws. But that is that developmental part, Spence, you speak of. The Jazz have done very well. But this is Will's baby, right? This is Will's first test. Can you develop a guy and make him into an all-star or close to it and be an integral part of your starting 5?
All right, Craig, before I set you loose, tonight's an interesting game, and I try to stay tuned in to Milwaukee games because we cheer for Dame around here. Milwaukee's an 8.5-point favorite. From what I have in front of me, as far as the injuries go right now, we know that Chris Middleton is out. He hasn't played this year. And it looks
Ankle surgery,
yeah, exactly. And it looks like Giannis is questionable from what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Lowry questionable, Clarkson questionable, and Isaiah Collier questionable as well. So let's start with a health update. What do you know about the health of both teams right now?
Well, I do know that the 3 players for the Jazz you just mentioned have all been upgraded to probable.
Okay.
So I think we're going to see Lowry. We're going to see JC. And you know what? I'm anxious to see Collier. Kind of more of a bulldog point guard who was basically raised as a point guard, unlike Keontae, who's making strides. But Collier will be an interesting fit. That means no minutes for Patty Mills, and that was kind of the plan anyway. But to fit Marketing back in means less minutes for Filipowski. If you get JC back in, you probably won't see much of Johnny Juzang or Bryce Sensabaugh. But I still think you'll see minutes, and it depends on how Will wants to divide those up. I haven't heard any updates since I walked in here to the press room yet on Antetokounmpo. Look, he was listed as a hip, then a right adductor, I'm not real sure, what's going on. Look, it's not between you and I because everyone's listening, but Milwaukee's 1-6, man. They've lost 6 in a row after their opening night win against Philly, and things aren't good here. And there's a lot of heat, mentioned in the local press and around the country. Hey, what's up with Milwaukee and Doc? So, they made the change last year. They moved Adrian Griffin out, and then Doc comes in. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to get a feel when I get out on the floor here in a bit to kind of see what's going on. But they haven't won a home game, by the way. They're 0-2, and their only win was on the road in Philadelphia, and that was on opening night. So interesting to see if Giannis is bucking for change or if he's actually hurt. But Lillard, can't carry this team alone. They don't have the deepest bench except for Bobby Portis, who I like a lot. And about the way he plays. He's just, consistent guy coming off the bench. But it's interesting to see how the Jazz respond tonight. They come in with confidence, Spence. And this is where you have to wonder, as a Jazz fan, how many wins, do you really actually want to put in your pocket, right? And, with this young team. But Will wants to win. He wants these guys to jump and make progress. And tonight could be an interesting scenario with a team, Milwaukee I'm speaking of, that seems a little bit upside down.
All right, Bowler. Well, I appreciate the time from the road. Have a great call tonight, and hopefully we can see you back in studio soon, okay?
All right, pal. Talk soon.
All right, Craig Bowler-Jack, he'll be on the call tonight as the Jazz are taking on Milwaukee. We'll see which players actually participate because NBA basketball these days, you never know. Brought to you by our friends at Big O Tires. Right now, it's their fall into savings sale. You can get $80 to $120 off select set of tires. They've got all the high-end tires you need. It's your true one-stop shop for automotive repair. Stop in for tires, wheels, alignments, rotations, balances, oil changes, brakes, batteries, shocks, struts, fluids, and more. There's a lot of dangerous words in that. Should probably slow down. They offer free tire rotations, flat repairs, air checks, alignment checks, check engine, and brake checks as well. Big O Tires has financing options to fit every budget and situation. Walk-ins are welcome, or schedule an appointment online or over the phone. Visit BigOTires.com to find a location near you. Going to do a little hockey. The Utah Hockey Club back in action. Neil Smith is our guest. Stevenson Sylvester later on. So we're back to Utah and BYU. Then we'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour. We'll say goodnight a little early for Utah Women's Hoops on a Thursday right here on ESPN 700. We got Stevenson Sylvester rolling by. Talk some Utah BYU football. We'll get to some NFL with Sly as well. So we've done mostly college football today, a little Utah Jazz. But how about a little Utah Hockey Club, as the Utah Hockey Club is in St. Louis to take on the Blues, which is just hilarious for so many different reasons. Been a rough stretch for the guys. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis, the great Neil Smith, former GM of the Rangers, the Islanders. He's a hockey lifer. Neil, first of all, happy Thursday. Second of all, how you feeling?
I'm feeling a little bit better, but my voice doesn't sound like it. But yesterday, I got to tell you, Spence, it was an amazing awakening when I was sitting at my computer, looking at stats, looking at things, ready for your call, and then realized I can't talk. I have no voice. So we had to delay this, but I'm feeling good. How about you?
I'm well, and I feel that because being in this business, like the voice is the moneymaker. So if I run into some allergies or a cold, it changes the entire thing. You've only been in this business for a little while, Neil. Back in the day, you could lose your voice and still go build a hockey club. It's a different thing when you're talking to a mic, yeah?
Oh, for sure. And when you're on TV, it's even more complicated. But radio, you're only a voice. That's all you are. So if you've got no voice or a larynx trouble, stay off the radio.
Yes, sir. All right. After a red hot start, things have crashed pretty mightily for the Utah Hockey Club. They're 2-8 in their last 10 games. And Connor Ingram, I'm going to need you to help me understand this because I don't want to put it all. I understand in hockey, you can't put it all on the goaltender. And Connor is a quality goalie. He's going to be fine. But 5-2-3 with an .881 save percentage and a 3.57 goals against average. According to Stathletes, he has a -7 goals saved above expected after finishing with a plus 3.4 goals saved above expected last year. How much of the leaky defense is on the goalie and how much of it's on the group? They just can't stop teams right now.
Well, I think that there's enough to go around. I think there's some on Connor Ingram. He's not playing up to the level that he can play at. In the NHL, to be a starting goaltender, you've got to be at 900 save percentage, which means in easy math that you're allowing 1 goal on every 10 shots. You can't be letting more than that in, and you can't have a goals against of 3.57. Now, having said that, with Dursey out and Marino out and them trying to fill that void with other guys, they're trying to get better defensively with their defensemen, but it's going to have to be a team effort. It's going to have to be everybody locking down the opposition, because when you're missing 2 key defensemen like that, the forwards can't take the chances that they would normally take. So they've got to be a little bit more conservative and help out.
So the offense continues to be fine. It was never going to be what it was to start the year, because what it was to start the year was historic. But, more often than not, they did get shut out. And I will get to Winnipeg in a moment. I don't know what's going on with Winnipeg. But, the Utah Hockey Club was able to get 3 against the Golden Knights, 4 against the Sharks. But it hasn't been what it was. So if we move to the other side of the equation and leave the defense behind, and I'm sure they're all intertwined, why do you think the offense has not been able to keep up with the pace it's set to start the year, which, again, was very, very good?
Well, remember who you're playing too. I mean, you got to give those teams credit. I mean, they're playing against 2 really good teams. They're playing Winnipeg. They're playing Vegas. I mean, those are good teams. But the other thing is, I think, Spence, I'll go back to what I said before, and that is when you're back on your heels because you're not sure. If you make a mistake, you don't have the defenders back there that you used to have, and you also your goalie's a little bit leaky, like Vejmelka and Ingram have been. Then you're not taking those offensive chances to score goals the way you do when you're very confident and when the group is confident. So it all goes hand in hand, and especially if you think when you're out on the ice, if you turn the puck over, it could very easily be in our net. You're going to be very conservative with what you do.
So tonight it is the St. Louis Blues, and ultimately they've lost Robert Thomas to a fractured ankle, but 2.69 goals per game in the Blues' first 13 games, 24th in the NHL. But they're really stout when it comes to their goalies, and they've got 2. It's Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer. So very good defensive team, but they don't score a lot of goals. Preview the game for us tonight as the Blues take on the Utah Hockey Club.
Well, they're playing Joel Hofer in net tonight, according to the sources that I have, and but his save percentage is 3.39. So there's some holes there. They allow a lot of shots, but so does Utah. Utah allows almost 30, just under 30 shots a game. So they're going to have to tighten that up. But interesting guys to look for tonight. Cairo is their best offensive player. He's got 11 points in 13 games. Broberg, that they signed from the Edmonton Oilers on an offer sheet, is having a good start to his season, and he's a defenseman. And Parayko is also a defenseman. Two out of their three top scorers on their team are defensemen, but they'll play hard for sure, and they always do. The Blues always do. But Hofer will be in net tonight.
All right, let's get back to a couple of the teams that I referenced. And, we were discussing the hot start for Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago. But it's one thing to have a hot start. But 8 straight wins to start the season. That's tied for the third longest streak in NHL history. Through 12 games, 59 goals. That's the highest total in their first 12 games since the 1995-96 Penguins scored 63 times. That's Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Ron Francis, Sergei Zubov, a phenomenal team to play NHL on the PlayStation with, which I did back in the day. So what stands out most about what really is a historic start from Winnipeg?
Well, that Kyle Connor stands out to me as playing out of his mind this year as a forward, as an offensive player, and Connor Hellebuck, who won the Vezina last year, is playing Vezina Trophy hockey again. So, those are the two guys that are really standing out and above everybody. But to have a record like they have at 12-1, you've got to have everybody, playing on all cylinders, and everything for them is going good. I mean, their power play is at 44%. Their penalty killing is been, middle of the pack, but that's still pretty good. So their goals for 4.7. They lead the league with that. They've just had a terrific start. But if you want me to pick out a couple of players, also on Morrissey on defense has been great for them. But Kyle Connor and Hellebuck and Morrissey, they've all been really good.
Let me ask you about a story before I set you loose. Igor Shesterkin, the goalie for the Rangers. We've been waiting for news on this potential extension. It sounds you're teasing it, Neil. Do you have any meat on the bone you can share?
Not really. I mean, other than I'm just, you hear things and you hear that things are, heating up. What that means, who knows? But you would think that the Rangers would be anxious to get him signed and not let him get near free agency. So I would imagine that there's something going on in the background in between the agent for Shesterkin and Chris Drury.
All right, Neil, got a lot of new hockey fans in the market. Where can they go find your podcast that you guys release often during the week?
Yeah, we had Bill Guerin, the GM of Minnesota, on this week, and it's on every platform. NHL Wraparound, you can find it on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, anywhere that you can find podcasts, you'll find it. And it's been a lot of fun, and we're doing it 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and give it a listen.
Neil, thank you, sir. I always appreciate the time. Get that voice ready to roll, and we'll get you back on next week, all right?
I'll sound like a different man next week.
There you go. There you go. The great Neil Smith built a juggernaut of a New York Ranger hockey team that won a Stanley Cup in the 90s. Also, general manager of the Islanders. He was the head scout for the Red Wings when they were kind of at their heyday. He's on Twitter. You can find the links to his work at NYC Neil Smith is where you find him. You can follow the podcast at NHL Wraparound is where you get that. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. It's the best spot for all your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon card collecting. Buy all your favorites there and even take your cards in. Maybe you have some rare cards in your collection you do not even know about. So that's what I did. My buddy Chris James, who owns the spot over there, his wife is really the brains behind the whole thing, but Chris is a sweet dude. When I heard he was getting in the business, I've had boxes of basketball, baseball, football cards in my possession for years. I probably should have thrown most of them away. I would just move them wherever I would go. And so I called. I said, can you look at my collection, see if there's anything of value? He said, yeah, bring it in. I had a Kobe Bryant Fleer rookie card I did not know I had. It's now sitting on my mantle. He's got a bunch of stories like that. So like me, if you're my age, you probably collected cards at one point. You're listening to Sports Talk Radio, so you're a sports fan. Grab the collection, go to your parents' house, get it out of the basement or wherever it is, take it over to Overtime Cards. They'll go through it for you, and they'll let you know if you have anything, that's worth holding on to. So check them out online at OvertimeCardsAndCollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. All right, do a little sports court coming up next. We have Stevenson Sylvester rolling by, get into the 5 o'clock hour of the show. We'll say goodnight a little early for Utah women's basketball. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends over at Handy and Handy Garrett and Preston. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. How's it going?
All good here. All good here. It's a fun week, as you guys know. So I've been following our first story a little bit, the clutch situation, Rich Paul. It looks like we do have a bit of an update. No arbitration. Is that what I'm reading? What's going on with our first story?
Yes, Spence. We've talked about this one time before. We got Rich Paul, better known as LeBron James' childhood friend, who has now become a really popular and successful sports agent, not only in the NBA but for some other sports leagues as well. Well, his sports agency is called Clutch Sports, and now we got another agent, a guy named Mark Termini, and he has sued Clutch Sports and Mark Paul, claiming a breach of contract claim. And what he said is that Clutch Sports hired him to negotiate some NBA contracts, and he didn't get paid for them. He was entitled to money off of several $1 billion of contracts. Well, as part of the lawsuit, Clutch Sports responded and said, number one, they filed a motion to dismiss his breach of contract claim, which that got denied. The judge said, no, you still are in the game and got to answer that. But the thing interesting they did is they said, well, because this is a sports agent contract and we're subject to the NBA Players Association rules, this has to be submitted to arbitration. And the judge looked at it and said, no, I don't think it does. And the reason they said that is because the claim is not it's a claim between Termini and Clutch Sports. It's a breach of contract between those two, and Termini did not have a privity of contract with a certain player. So where there is a contract breach with a player and an agent who's a licensed and accredited agent with the NBA, yes, it does have to go to arbitration under the Players Association rules, but because Termini and Clutch had an outside contract, it was kind of like an independent contractor they hired to do some of these. The judge said, no, this one doesn't have to go arbitration. We get to go through the court process, and here is breach of contract claim, and him support his damages for, $4 to $5 million of what he says he's owed.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
Well, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this story in the future because it's really the case is now that they've kind of got over this hurdle about arbitration or how this was going to proceed. We're just in the discovery phase, so there's a long ways to go on this case. It's just getting going.
All right, let's move over to very rich people fighting against each other, which is always interesting. So this situation with the Timberwolves and the Lynx ownership dispute is actually really, really fascinating to me. Maybe it's because it's an NBA ownership story, but of course, this is a situation where Glenn Taylor thought he was going to basically sell the team with Mark Lowry and A-Rod, and it's been chaos since the deal. What's the latest?
Yeah, it has. And part of the reason it has been some chaos and has resulted now in this litigation, which has just started in arbitration this week, is because of the unique way that the deal was initially set up. And so back in 2021, Glenn Taylor, who's been the owner of the Timberwolves and the Lynx, reached out to Mark Lore and Alex Rodriguez, and they put together a deal where they would purchase the team for $1.5 billion, but that they would do it over time in these increments. They'd pay 20% here and 20% there and another 40% or whatever, and finally purchase the team. And so what it did is it made A-Rod and Mark Lore minority owners over that first couple of years. And so they got involved with the team and making decisions. And basically the idea was Glenn Taylor was going to teach these new owners, he was going to show them the ropes, right? And ease them into this, into owning a team and making a decision and how to do this. And so it's a little bit unusual how that happened. Well, along the way, as it's approaching the time to make the final sale, A-Rod and his team, they made a little bit of change in their financing. And Glenn Taylor used this as an opportunity to pull out of the deal. And so what's happening now is, the new owners, they're trying to force the sale and make it go through and happen, say, hey, we had an agreement. You were going to sell the team. And Glenn Taylor's saying, no, you guys didn't have the money. I had a right to, void this contract and back out of the deal with them. But also what's the undercurrent here is they're saying this is just a case of buyer's remorse or seller's remorse, right? The team now is worth almost $3 billion, not $1.5 billion. And so maybe you should have held out to sell the team later. So it's just started in arbitration. There's a 3-panel arbitration happening, just started on Monday this week. So we should find out soon.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, so it seems like we're talking about these things being forced into arbitration a lot, and just a little bit of information for the listeners out there. This one is going to go to an arbitration panel, and sometimes when parties agree to arbitrate or they're forced into arbitration, they try to choose an arbitrator, and a lot of times they can't choose someone that they really like. So what happens is each party chooses an arbitrator they really like, and then those two arbitrators choose a third party, what they call a third-party neutral party. So this is going in front of a 3-party arbitration panel, and I suspect that's how it came up with the panel.
All right, let's move over to the latest with Kanye West and Adidas. Preston, I know you call him Ye, so I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. So this has been going on for a couple of years. Fill us in as far as what the update is.
Well, when I saw the headline, I learned 2 things today. That he goes by Ye or Ye. I didn't know that. When I saw that name, I didn't even associate it with Kanye. And that his company is called Yeezy. I didn't know that. And so I'm probably one of the only guys that knows that. But this grows out of a relationship where I guess Yeezy is a high-end producer of shoe wear and other things that a lot of people really like. Well, he had a relationship with Nike, and that kind of fell apart or ended. So he entered into a contract with Adidas, and as part of this contract, Adidas bought, incidentally, we're talking about this on Sports Court, Kanye West, simply because it involves Adidas, and they're a big shoe manufacturer of sports. So that's how it makes it to Sports Court. But as part of the deal, they bought a lot of his stock, like $75 million worth. Well, along the way, our guy Ye makes some really public anti-Semitic marks and repeats a bunch, and Adidas says, hold the phone, Ye, we don't want to be involved with you anymore. And they come out with some really strong statements saying, this doesn't represent our brand, and, we're done with this. So Kanye, he sued them for breach of contract, and one of the issues was they were holding on to his stock. So they've resolved this, and I think an interesting statement that comes out is someone comes out and says, hey, here's a dispute, and no money has changed hands. We've resolved it. The dispute is in the past. We're going our separate ways. So this, which has been going on for a couple of years, has been resolved, and no money changed hands. But the lawyers made a lot of money, I can tell you that.
Preston with the street cred today. I got to say, I'm very impressed. All right, Garrett, you're up on this one.
Yeah.
Well, I just was going to say, you don't know exactly what the motivations of the parties are to be done with this thing because they've been fighting it for a while. But, I was just going to point out Adidas, I guess their sales are up 7% over last year. And so maybe they just thought, you know what, we don't need any more Yee's drama. Let's be done with this. So it's over.
Moving over to a story out of pro football, the Cleveland Browns suing the city over a law that is called the Art Modell Law, which I did not know until 5 minutes ago. So the time is yours.
Yeah, well, the Art Modell Law, this arises out of when Art Modell moved the Browns to Baltimore in 1995, and the city of Cleveland was not happy about that. And so what happened is Ohio, in response, they enacted the Modell Law. And what this basically says is that if an Ohio-based sports team is playing in a tax-supported facility, right, for taxpayer money, that they've got some requirements before they can't just up and leave, right, and go play somewhere else. And so it requires them to do that. They'd have to get government consent and offer the team for sale to local buyers first. So it's just a way that Ohio put in place a law to keep teams in Ohio because they felt like, hey, this benefits our local community here after we've invested in teams, especially with a taxpayer-supported stadium, for example. So the Browns, pretty clearly, they want out of their current the stadium they're playing in, and their lease expires in 2029, and they want to build a new facility, a domed stadium, and they want to move out. And so what they're doing now is they're anticipating this a problem with Cleveland, and so they filed a lawsuit to have the Art Modell Law struck down, and they're arguing that it's not constitutional. And the law hasn't really ever been challenged in court like this. And, some people have looked at it and have thought that maybe it is unconstitutional. But it's a preemptive move looking ahead into the future when this lease expires, in about 5 years so that they can try to get out and have their own stadium.
All right, Preston, you're up.
Yeah, I think, I think this when they enacted this law, they thought, well, this is so we don't move out of state, not just so we don't move to the other side of the city. And one of their claims is that it's unconstitutional. And the thing they claim is that it violates the due process clause because it's vague and ambiguous. And I think that's a pretty solid argument that it's vague and ambiguous. Like, hey, we thought we couldn't move out of state, like happened when they went to Baltimore. We didn't know we couldn't move across the city or across the county.
All right, final one for today. A longtime women's hockey coach is suing Harvard University for what is being alleged as gender discrimination. The floor is yours.
Yeah, a story I hadn't heard about, but Katie Stone, a very successful women's ice hockey coach at Harvard. Some allegations came out a few years ago about a toxic culture and even some hazing going on, and it came out that she wasn't involved or supervising or even aware of the hazing, but down the road, she was forced to resign. And when you say forced to resign, we hear this and it was like, well, was she going to be fired if she didn't resign? And there might have been, behind the scenes, paid out her contract. But now she's coming and she's suing Harvard, and she's claiming a couple of things. One, she's not claiming a breach of contract, like, when people get fired and that it might be an issue whether they're fired for cause. She's claiming gender discrimination, and she cites a couple of things. One, she says there's been incidences with some of the men's teams involving some things, and there's kind of been a practice of looking the other way. And she also claims that she's been underpaid. So she's looking to get collect on her contract and try and increase that contract. Really, she's going to cite to how there is a disparity in the women's contracts, the women coaches' contracts, and the men's coaches' contracts, which goes on at a lot of universities. I know some universities have in place a thing that says, well, if the basketball coach makes this amount, the women's basketball coach has to make a percentage of that amount. So anytime that basketball coach's contract goes up, the women's coach is thrilled about it. But I don't know if that's the case at Harvard.
All right, Garrett, final word is yours.
Well, yeah, she's just basically saying she's being held to a different standard than the male coaches, right? That she's employing the same sort of coaching strategies, and motivation and getting after her players to get them to perform as the male coaches do, but that the standards being applied differently. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay, gentlemen, before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, we love coming on here with you, Spence. We'd love to hear from the listeners out there. If they have legal issues, give us a call at 801-264-6677 or jump on our website at handylawutah.com.
Thanks so much for the time. How are we feeling about Saturday night?
Well, I can make a strong prediction.
Let's hear it.
I will be there.
Okay.
That's the 100% prediction I can make.
Well, I love that you're going.
It'll be cold, and I'll be there too.
Look at this.
Cold, dark, late.
Okay. All right.
Praying for a good game.
Okay. Yeah, that's all we can ask for, gentlemen. Thanks for the time, and go Utes, yeah?
Go Utes.
Oh, we didn't get one from Garrett. We only got one. Oh, man. All right. Coming up on the other side, back to Utah football, is our guy Sly is going to join us. Going to say goodnight just a little bit early in time for Utah women's basketball, so stay tuned for that. But time now for more Utah BYU chatter, NFL, potentially if we have a little time. Our guy Stevenson Sylvester on a Thursday rolls by. Sly, happy Thursday, buddy. How we doing?
Happy Thursday, rivalry week. What's up, brother? Let's go.
I appreciate your time, and I love the enthusiasm. So let's give us a little peek behind the curtain, man. What is this week like for somebody who has played in this game? What are some of the emotions that are conjured up?
Well, I mean, it depends on what level, you're at with all of this, right? Like some of the young guys that haven't been familiar with it, haven't been around it. There's actually a lot of other guys a part of the program that, hasn't had time. This series has been on and off, for years. But this week for guys that know, like my junior and senior year, even sophomore year that's had some experience with it, your blood is boiling, the entire week, and you're trying to really control your output, right? You got to control your emotions because you don't want to get too excited too early in the week and you're not ready to go on Saturday. And so for me, like right now, Thursday, it's getting closer to the day, right? ESPN is covering it. It's a big deal. The city's on fire. Everybody's talking about it. So everybody's talking about it in the classrooms. Everybody's wearing their Utah gear around even more than usual. So all of those things come into play. You notice those things, even the stuff that's not said. You just feel it in the air. I've been playing Phil Collins in the air of the night all week this week. This has been it's an absolutely incredible week. And as soon as that kickoff happens, you really feel how important it is to the community, right? Like everybody knows, you can feel when the crowd is live and juiced up. Imagine them being live and juiced up during a rivalry game. And so absolutely love it. This week is crazy, and it's bringing back great memories of me preparing for this game. Straight focus and lots of intensity.
All right. How does Coach Witt prepare his team for this week? What's different about Kyle's approach when it is BYU week, as somebody who went through it firsthand?
I don't really think you see him crack a smile all week. I think his intensity radiates through the team, right? Like, it's so weird. Like he played at BYU, but he just does not like him. And it's crazy. And so you really go off of your head guy, your guy in charge. His vibe, his attitude really delivers through the team. So his intensity, especially the way the month of October went for this football team, I can just tell his intensity's got to be at an all-time high this week. And I think that's going to radiate through the team. And so and you just see his level of focus, his level of intensity, that impacts us as players. Sorry, I'm Uncle Rico. I'm saying us. It impacts the players, and they increase their level of focus, their level of intensity. So I think he's a big proponent to how this game is going to go.
So you're going to be good with this because there's this narrative going throughout the community this week about the fact that only 9 Utah players out of 125 have played BYU. And there's only a handful of BYU players that have played against Utah. And both rosters are littered with out-of-state kids. So as someone who grew up elsewhere and then came here to play for the University of Utah, what's it like experiencing this from an out-of-state perspective? And do you think the out-of-state kids really understand how intense this is going to be on Saturday night?
I got to be honest, they won't really understand. I mean, they can get and that's why the coaching of the history this week is so important, right? Is because when the game actually happens, you're able to really understand what they were talking about all week. But as an out-of-towner, you don't get it until the game is played, until the outcome is had. And whether that's a win or a loss, you don't really feel it until that moment. You kind of get glimpses to be able to understand. But I'm telling you, it's just as important. The community, the fans that show up, your intensity, your passion throughout the game, will showcase to the players how important this game is. The players literally their whole momentum, their whole playing style will go off of the crowd's intensity. So if the crowd is into it all game, so will the players, and you're going to get one heck of an outcome. So it's just as important as the players are, the fans are for this game.
Do you have a personal favorite memory or a couple of favorite memories in your time playing for Utah against BYU?
Man, just being able to play in the game, right? To say that I played in that game is all the memory. Every single year I could take a bits and pieces from them from when I played. It was a long time ago. 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. Yeah, I know Utah's had like a winning streak, but I was 1-3 against these guys. And so I hate them even more because of that. I think they're the only team that I got a losing record against. And so, like, that just makes me that much more intense about this rivalry. I love that we went 9 in a row. Hopefully we can get back on track with the winning records and do that. But, yeah, man, this rivalry was great. The moments heading down to Lavelle Edwards Stadium, I absolutely love going into opponent stadium, into hostile environments. I've been in some of the craziest hostile environments, and I tell you, Lavelle Edwards is right up there, 1 or 2 or 3. That's the most hostile environment I've been in, and I love it. I love the feeling of nervousness I had, before kickoff. How intense I was. I mean, from specifically 2008 and 2009, before that kickoff happened, I'm literally blacked out red. I don't see nothing. I hear crowd intensity, the boos, and I just see that color blue, and I want to rip it apart. Like, that's just my whole mentality that whole time warming up. I just looking at their sideline, looking for my little punk that I can punk all game. What old lineman am I going to talk crap to all game? Is it Dallas Reynolds? Is it some of these other freaking dudes? I was so locked in heading into the stadium before the game started. And then, of course, the whole first quarter in a rivalry game is all fights. And so I was fighting that entire first quarter with all the boys. So, like, yeah, that's my biggest memory is that first quarter and that pregame of these rivalries, man. It is something that a lot of people can't experience, and it'll be awesome.
I got to know, because you played on a Utah team with guys that like to talk. Who talked the most smoke? Like, who was the best at it on your side?
I mean, aside from me,
of course, yeah.
We had a few, man. First that comes to mind is Terrell Cole. I don't know if a lot of people remember Terrell Cole. That dude, he would get under everybody's skin. And I'm in a group chat with him now, so I know he still does it. He still has it in him. He's got it. That never left him. But other guys was like Kepa Geisen. Kepa Geisen talked a lot of smack. Kanape Iliapo was great at talking smack. On the offensive side of the ball, Robert Conley, he was subtle. He was more straightforward. Like, you want to talk to and he'd get it. On the other offensive side of the ball, Jeremy Brooks. I'd have to give it to Jeremy Brooks and Brent Castile as being some of the biggest smack talkers when I played at Utah. And then, of course, me, Rojo, Kepa. Cole was quiet. Cole don't ever say nothing. And then everybody's favorite, the legend himself, Sean Smith.
Oh, yes, of course. Sean probably should have been one of the first names I thought of. What about on the other side? Did BYU have any guys that could keep up with the talk and smoke that stand out? From my experience, it was good. I can't remember anybody's names, but a lot of the old linemen, would talk smack. And I remember in 2007, I was talking some smack, and then it was after a play. It ended up being an incomplete pass, and then I'm coming back, and he starts saying something because I got by him, but like I didn't get to the quarterback, and he started saying something. He said something really foul, and I'm just like, you guys can say that at BYU?
and he just started freaking cracking up laughing. And so like it's all great in sport, to be able to experience that. Austin Collie talked a lot of smack. Harvey Unga did talk a lot of smack. I can't really say that they started it, but they definitely contributed. He definitely contributed. So Max Hall really didn't say much. He said a lot after the game, but during the game he didn't talk a lot of smack. But yeah, those guys got into it. It's the same over there. They probably got the same amount of guys that talk smack as we do.
Since you brought up Max Hall, we had Austin Collie on earlier in the week. And, I've met Max a number of times. I've interviewed him, and he seems like a fine guy. I don't pretend to know him at all. I don't think I've ever asked you, what was the reaction of the locker room? Because you referenced Max didn't say a thing during the game and then decided to run his mouth after the game, which is pretty telling, to be honest. But what was the reaction in the locker room? I know what it was in the community. He was a pariah up here, but what was the reaction in the locker room when you heard what Max had said?
Well, I mean, he said that after they won in 2009.
Right.
Right? That freaking stupid 2009. And so we were in the locker room. We were kind of dejected, and getting back to Salt Lake City before we even heard that he said that. It was actually on our way back to Salt Lake City that we heard that, and we were all actually getting together that night, so we all got to say it. And it was my senior year, so there's nothing we could do after the fact, but we kind of laughed at it. We were just like, because of that fact, we knew you didn't talk smack during the game, but you want to say that now. And so, but I can kind of get where he's coming from, especially the year before. Our fans went absolutely ham on him in 2008, and I loved every bit of it. So I hope our fans do the same thing to Jake Retzloff this year, so he can get baptized into this holy war and the right way. And but yeah, I don't know. I ain't had much from it because there was nothing that we could do because we didn't play them again after the fact. But we just laughed at it because we knew that it was like, oh, you wasn't talking no smack in the game, but you was you definitely want to say something after the fact.
All right, Sly, I want you to help me understand something here because most of the defensive numbers for Utah football are very good, and most of the metrics indicate the defense is very good, and I believe that that's the case. But they're last in fumbles forced, they're last in fumbles recovered. This is in the conference. They're 9th in interceptions, and they're 12th in sacks. So usually the things that we see from a Utah defense are havoc plays and turnovers and pressure in the quarterback. So again, it's a good defense. It's number one in overall scoring defense. They're top 6 in the country, first down and third down. So they put you in difficult situations. It's hard for teams to convert third downs. But tell me why, from your vantage point, Utah football has not been able to really pressure the quarterback or force turnovers in a way that we're accustomed to seeing.
This is such a great question. I kind of talked about it on Steve Bartle's podcast last week, or was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last week. Very crazy to look at that, right? You're doing so well on first and third down, but you're also at the bottom in these other categories. And sadly, this happens, and it happens because of the position that you're put in, right? Sacks, turnovers, havoc plays happen because you're able to pin your ears back and get after the other team, right? This defense has not been in a position where we've been able to pin our ears back and get after the other team. We've had to really be conservative on the defensive side of the ball. We've blitzed a few times, but we've had to be conservative because it's just like in the TCU game, right? You let TCU's offense drive all the way down the field on the first drive, but you create a turnover, right? We create a turnover, you give it to our offense. What does our offense do with it? Absolutely nothing. And so we're deep in our own side of the field, and we have to punt out of that side. We punt, 40-yard punt. You give them so you're giving them the ball back on their own 45 to midfield, and so they only have 50 yards to go. So we've been having to be really conservative and not be able to take risks. When you go for an interception, when you go for a strip fumble, when you make all those things, you go for a sack, you're taking a risk in some aspect, right? You're creating some kind of vulnerability in the defense at one point. If I go for a pick, if I miss that pick, this guy can go over the top, right? There's no confidence right now in the defense and our offense being able to get our back as a defender, right? So if I go for this risk and miss and they get in a good position, they get a field goal or a touchdown, can our offense come back and score? Or if I take this risk, we're going to get that much further behind. So I don't see our defense taking risks in order to create those havoc plays. We've been having to be extremely conservative because we haven't been able to play conservative or complementary football. It's been very difficult in that aspect for us to be able to achieve a lot of the havoc plays that we're used to because of those simple facts.
All right, got to ask you about the quarterback position because obviously it's just been the number one thing, and it is the number one position. Isaac, Brandon splitting reps. Sly, from my vantage point, when I heard Brandon, he was made available to the media on Tuesday, which is not typical. When I heard Brandon talk, he sounded like a kid that's starting a football game on Saturday night. I don't know. We have Coach Witt on the show tomorrow. I'll see if I can get any info in that direction. So how do you think this is going to play out? Do you have a preference? And ultimately, is there a massive difference between the two right now?
Well, here's the thing. With practices being closed off, spring game not being that telling of what's going on, we're just privy to the information that the coaches have given us in the off seasons and during practices and stuff, right? So we can't really tell. And yes, Brandon Rose, he's been a great kid. He's been in this program. He's had to take the back seat a lot. Even last year, he didn't get his opportunities and this and that. So, again, we're going into a position where we have to just rely on, the coaching staff making the right decisions, which is what they get paid to do, and put us in a position to win. For me, I'm on the other side of this, right? We don't have an opportunity to win the Big 12 championship or get to the Big 12 championship. So I need to make sure that my team is secure and ready to go for the future, right? And so the future is Isaac Wilson to me. I think both of these guys have really strong arms. I know we're talking about Isaac Wilson, and he missed a couple of the short, flat passes in the Houston game. But there's a lot of things going on with that to make that happen. But confidence is key in the quarterback position room, and when you take the field. I haven't seen enough tape on Brandon Rose to be confident and say, you're the guy, you're definitely better than Isaac. And then, of course, we haven't seen Isaac with, Bajakian, for more than a couple weeks and seeing how these guys can do it. I don't know if Isaac Wilson's confidence is completely shot for the rest of this year. So you have to go with Brandon Rose. I don't know if, Isaac has done enough in this bye week and this to rebuild his confidence in himself to get out on the field. For me, I would put Isaac in, right? I'll put Isaac. He's familiar with this rivalry. He understands the intensity. And if you practice with him and you've simplified this offense, you've given him things to be able to succeed in this, then, I can definitely say that he can lead us to victory on Saturday. But, of course, we don't know what we don't know. So I'm going to have to wait till kickoff to know who's going to start at QB. But, here nor there, I think this team is much more than the quarterback position. So for us to keep putting onus on that sole position, I think is terrible. And as players, the same thing. Just because Cam Rising goes out, Isaac Wilson throws a bad pass, it can't demoralize the rest of the team. There's so many different ways people can affect the football game. And so if you can understand that, we should get a lot of play out of everybody else on this football team. So I'm just more so waiting for that, for everybody to step up and take advantage of this rivalry.
I feel like the start of these games are often telling. And I wanted you to take us kind of beneath the helmet a little bit about the tricky balance of making sure you're playing very hard as you can, but not getting consumed by the moment, not getting overwhelmed by the intensity, because at some point that will wane, and then it's just time to play football. So what are you going to be looking for, Sly, right out of the gates from the Utes to indicate they're in a good place?
Well, I mean, to indicate they're in a good place is kind of different from traditional years, right? I'm more on the stage of we're on a 4-game losing streak, so can we showcase any offense, right? Like that's where my head is at. That's where the importance is at for me. Is can we show that we have it together, that we're playing with confidence and we can make it happen. The beginning of this game can be whatever. I've seen it throughout the rivalry go both ways. The team down south getting a great start, Utah getting a great start, and in the end, it's completely different, right? And so, one, you got to be locked in throughout the game. Every single play, every blade of turf grass out there is going to be extremely important the entire game. Every second of that 60-minute football game is going to be very, very, very important to some capacity in this football game. So I hope these guys just understand that they can't miss an opportunity when it's presented. If you have an opportunity to get an interception, you got to make it. You got an opportunity to get a strip sack or make a tackle or force these guys out and punt the football. You got an opportunity to catch the football. There's been some drops by key players on this receiving core. Right, we've seen some key drops by Dorian Singer, Micah Pittman, Money Parks before he got injured. We've seen some drops from these guys. These are opportunities when it presents itself, and when it presents itself, they need to make that happen. And so, with that being said, like you can't miss your opportunity in this football game. In a rivalry holy war game, this game is about who can take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to them.
Sly, I'm putting 30 seconds on the clock. Tell us about the Tackle the Cold coat drive coming up on Saturday.
Tackle the Cold Cold Drive, the NFLPA, which is a new chapter here in Utah, Players Association, former players from the team down south, former players from Utah, former players from Utah State, and then other former players from around the United States live here in Utah, and we created a chapter with the NFL Players Association, and we're partnering with Utah Foster Care to provide foster kids with new coats for the winter. So if you guys have in your hearts to give this season, we're doing a coat drive at the tailgate this weekend. Our tailgate lot is right in front of the Aquatic Center in the main tailgate lot. And you can drop off new coats. If you don't have new coats, you can do gift cards or Venmo at Utah Foster Care Foundation on Venmo. But contribute if you can. We got to get these foster kids some new clothes for the winter because it's going to be cold this year for sure.
Sly, you're the man. We'll see you Saturday, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Appreciate you.
All right, we got to get out of here. Utah women's basketball comes your way. Coming up next, special thank you today, Tony Jones, Gordon Monson, Craig Bowlerjack, and, of course, Stevenson, Sylvester, and Neil Smith. Talk to you tomorrow right here